The Galactic Classification Bureau stood as one of the most respected institutions in known space, its towering crystalline spires reaching toward the stars from the heart of Nexus Prime. For over the Bureau had maintained perfect order in the galaxy through its comprehensive species rating system. Every sentient race that emerged from there eventually found themselves seated across from a classification officer, undergoing the standardized tests that would determine their place in galactic society. Doctor adjusted her bioluminescent tentacles nervously as she reviewed the morning's schedule. As senior classification officer for Sector 7, she had processed over 10,000 species evaluations during her 2-century career. The routine had become as natural as breathing Earth's methane atmosphere. Intelligence quotient analysis, technological assessment, cultural sophistication metrics, threat evaluation, and final placement into one of the 17 established categories that governed galactic commerce, diplomacy, and territorial rights. The 17 categories were sacred law throughout the galaxy. Category 1 housed the eternal builders, ancient beings who had transcended physical form eons ago. Categories 2 through 5 included the various advanced civilizations that formed the Galactic Council. Categories 6 through 12 encompassed the standard spacefaring races that made up the bulk of galactic society. Categories 13 through 16 covered primitive species, pre-civilizations, and those requiring guidance or protection. Category 17 was reserved for dangerous species requiring containment or elimination. Never in recorded history had a species failed to fit into this system. The mathematics were elegant, the psychology sound, and the results consistent across countless worlds and cultures, until today. Its primary viewing screen flickered to life, displaying the basic information about the day's first evaluation. Species designation, human. Origin, Sol 3 locally designated Earth. Recently achieved faster-than-light travel through an unconventional method involving the manipulation of spacetime rather than traditional dimensional folding. Preliminary scans indicated a bipedal carbon-based with moderate technological advancement and a remarkably short evolutionary timeline. The transport beam materialized in the center of the evaluation chamber, and its first glimpse of the human specimen made her pause. The creature stood roughly 2 meters tall, covered in synthetic fabrics of surprising quality for such a young species. Its skin was a warm brown color, and dark hair covered the top of its cranial region. Most interesting were its eyes, small compared to her own species' sensory organs, but possessing an alertness that seemed to every detail of its surroundings instantly. "Welcome to the Galactic Classification Bureau," began, her translator converting her chemical emissions into the human's primitive audio-based language. "I am Doctor, and I will be conducting your species evaluation today. Please state your designation for the record." The human straightened slightly and noticed the subtle confidence in its posture. "Captain Sarah, representing humanity and the United Earth Alliance. We're honored to participate in this process, Doctor." Noted the diplomatic response while beginning the standard neural scans. The human's brain activity was fascinating, far more complex than anticipated for such a young species. The neural pathways fired in patterns she had never encountered, creating connections that conventional understanding of intelligence development. "Let us begin with the cognitive assessment," announced, activating the holographic display that materialized complex three-dimensional puzzles in the air before the human. These tests had been refined over to challenge every known form of intelligence, from the crystalline logic processors of the to the quantum-linked consciousness of the. Captain studied the first puzzle for exactly 3 seconds before her hands moved with surgical precision, manipulating the holographic elements into their solution. Tentacles twitched in surprise. The average completion time for that particular puzzle was 47 minutes. Even the most advanced Category 5 species typically required at least 15 minutes. The next puzzle materialized, designed to test spatial reasoning and multidimensional thinking. Again, the human solved it within moments, her movements economical and confident. By the 5th puzzle, one that had stumped several Category 4 civilizations, realized something unprecedented was occurring. "Interesting approach," commented, trying to maintain her professional composure while her instruments recorded readings that challenged everything she understood about intelligence classification. "Tell me, Captain, how does your species typically approach problem solving?" The human paused in her manipulation of the 6th puzzle, which was dissolving into its solution even as she spoke. We tend to look for patterns others might miss, I suppose. My grandmother used to say that humans see connections where others see chaos. We're stubborn that way. Scanner indicated that the human had just solved a puzzle originally designed to test Category 2 civilizations. Her 3 hearts began beating in an irregular rhythm as she initiated the technological assessment protocols. Holographic displays filled the chamber with representations of various technologies, from simple fusion reactors to complex dimensional manipulators. Please identify the function and efficiency rating of these devices, instructed, expecting to spend the next several hours walking the human through technologies far beyond their species' current capabilities. Captain moved through the technological displays like a student reviewing familiar textbooks. She correctly identified advanced propulsion systems her species had never encountered, accurately predicted the function of exotic energy collection arrays, and most disturbing of all, suggested practical improvements to several devices that new had taken other species centuries to develop. This quantum resonance chamber is elegant, observed, studying a device that the Category 3 had spent 400 years perfecting. But you're losing about 12% efficiency in the harmonic stabilizers. If you adjusted the frequency modulation here and modified the containment field geometry like this. She gestured, and the holographic display reconfigured itself according to her suggestions. Instruments confirmed what her training told her was impossible. The human's modifications would indeed improve the device's efficiency by the exact percentage she had. More troubling, the human had identified the improvement within minutes of seeing a technology that represented centuries of advanced development. The cultural assessment proved equally confounding. Captain demonstrated sophisticated understanding of galactic diplomatic protocols despite humanity's recent emergence into space. When presented with complex ethical dilemmas that typically revealed a species' fundamental values and limitations, the human navigated them with a nuanced wisdom that suggested centuries of philosophical development. Your species faces a scenario where saving one group requires sacrificing another, and both groups have equal moral standing, presented. How do you resolve this? We don't accept the premise, replied calmly. In my experience, when someone presents you with an impossible choice, you're usually asking the wrong question. We look for the third option, the solution that others assume doesn't exist. Sometimes it means changing the rules of the game entirely. As the hours passed, found herself confronting readings that made no sense according to every classification model in existence. The human consistently performed at levels suggesting categories 2 through 5, depending on the specific test. Yet their species was barely 3 centuries into their technological age and had only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last 50 years. The final standard assessment was the threat evaluation, designed to measure a species' potential for aggression and their likelihood of destabilizing galactic peace. Activated the psychological profile algorithms and began the carefully crafted scenario testing. Captain, imagine your species encountered a significantly more advanced civilization that demanded your world's resources and threatened your people. How would humanity respond? The human's expression grew thoughtful, and for the first time during the evaluation, detected something in the human's demeanor that made her unconsciously adjust her position in her chair. It wasn't aggression exactly, but rather a quiet intensity that seemed to fill the chamber. We'd tried diplomacy first, of course, said, her voice maintaining its calm tone. But if they threatened our families, our children, our way of life? She paused, and her small human eyes held depths that made skin change color involuntarily. Well, Doctor, humans have a saying, nobody fights like cornered rats. We're very good at surviving impossible odds, and we have a long history of making much larger opponents regret underestimating us. Threat assessment readings spiked beyond anything in her experience, not because the human had threatened violence, but because every instinct her species had developed over millions of years was screaming that she was in the presence of a perfectly designed predator. Yet the human remained calm, diplomatic, even friendly. The contradiction was deeply unsettling. As the standard evaluation concluded, faced an unprecedented situation. Her instruments contained data that fit no existing classification category. The human demonstrated intelligence levels that fluctuated wildly across the spectrum, technological intuition that surpassed species with more development, cultural sophistication that suggested ancient wisdom, and an underlying capacity for both creation and destruction, that measurement. For the first time in her distinguished career, Doctor stared at her evaluation screen and admitted to herself that the Bureau's perfect system had encountered something it was never designed to handle. The classification algorithms were cycling endlessly, unable to generate a coherent rating for humanity. Captain sat patiently in her chair, apparently unaware that she had just broken a system that had successfully every form of intelligent life in known space. Her presence was somehow both reassuring and deeply unnerving, like sitting next to a sleeping volcano that might either create new lands or destroy everything around it. His tentacles trembled as she realized she would need to contact the Bureau's highest authorities. This evaluation would require intervention from minds far more experienced than her own, because humanity had just proven that the galaxy's understanding of intelligence, development, and classification might be fundamentally flawed. The human smiled, a facial expression that revealed an array of teeth that reminded uncomfortably of her most efficient predators, and asked politely, "Is there anything else you need, Doctor? I know this process can be complicated, and we're happy to provide any additional information that might be helpful." As reached for her emergency communication array, she wondered if humanity realized they had just shattered the foundation of galactic civilization simply by being themselves. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Classification Bureau's High Council convened within 6 hours of Dr. Unprecedented report. The crystalline chamber that normally hosted routine administrative discussions now buzzed with intention that none of the assembled beings had experienced in their long careers. Representatives from each of the major galactic civilizations materialized through various transportation methods, their forms reflecting the vast diversity of intelligent life that had found harmony within the established classification system. High Arbitrator, a Category 2 being whose species had overseen galactic classification for the past millennium, materialized as a shimmering geometric pattern of pure energy. His consciousness interfaced directly with the chamber's central processing core as he reviewed the data that had prompted this emergency session. "Colleagues," his thoughts resonated through the chamber's translation matrix, "we face an unprecedented situation. Doctor's report indicates that species designation, human, has produced classification results that our systems cannot process. This has never occurred in 3,000 years of galactic evaluation." The assembled council members shifted uncomfortably. Supreme Analyst, whose Category 3 civilization had helped establish the original classification protocols, extended his crystalline appendages in a gesture of skepticism. "Surely this is a malfunction of the evaluation equipment. No species can exist outside our classification parameters. The mathematics are absolute." "That was my initial assumption as well," replied, his energy patterns flickering with what other beings might interpret as uncertainty. "However, I have personally reviewed all sensor data, run diagnostics on every piece of evaluation equipment, and even brought in Category 1 Eternal Builders to verify the calculations. All systems functioned perfectly. The anomaly lies not in our instruments, but in the subject species itself." Doctor appeared via holographic projection from her evaluation chamber, where Captain waited patiently for the continuation of her assessment. Her bioluminescent tentacles displayed patterns of deep concern as she addressed the council. "Honored members, I have conducted over 10,000 species evaluations in my career. I have classified everything from hive minds spanning multiple star systems to individual consciousness, so advanced they exist partially outside normal spacetime. Yet this human defies every model we possess." She activated her presentation displays, filling the chamber with data streams that painted an impossible picture. "Observe the cognitive assessment results. The subject solved Category 5 puzzles in seconds, demonstrated intuitive understanding of technologies centuries beyond their development level, and showed strategic thinking that surpassed our most advanced military minds. Yet brain scans indicate a completely biological intelligence with no cybernetic enhancement, no genetic modification, and no external augmentation of any kind." Council Member Ra, representing the ancient Category 4 contemplatives, projected her thoughts with careful precision. "Perhaps this individual represents an exceptional specimen rather than a typical example of their species. Single beings do not determine classification ratings." "That possibility occurred to me as well," Doctor acknowledged. I requested additional human subjects for comparative analysis. The results are disturbing. The holographic display shifted to show evaluation data from 12 additional human subjects, each representing different geographic regions and professional backgrounds from Earth. The pattern remained consistent across all subjects. Performance levels that fluctuated wildly across classification categories, technological intuition that exceeded their species' development by centuries, and underlying psychological profiles that suggested capabilities far beyond their apparent civilization level. Most troubling, Doctor continued, is their threat assessment profile. Every human subject tested demonstrates what our algorithms classify as dormant apex predator characteristics. They show no aggressive behavior during evaluation, yet our deepest psychological scans indicate a species-wide capacity for violence and strategic thinking that exceeds anything in our database. High Arbitrator processed this information while accessing historical records spanning galactic civilization. In 3 of classification, we have encountered exactly 17 species that required Category 17 containment or elimination protocols. Each time, the threat was immediately apparent through aggressive behavior, technological imperialism, or psychotic social structures. You suggest that humans represent a potential Category 17 threat that shows no overt dangerous behavior. The data indicates something far more complex than traditional threat assessment can measure, Doctor replied. Human psychology demonstrates remarkable adaptability, intense social bonding, and problem-solving approaches that consistently find solutions others consider impossible. They appear to be simultaneously capable of great compassion and terrifying efficiency in achieving their goals. To demonstrate her point, she activated a recording from one of the human evaluations. A young human female named Dr. Lisa was responding to a complex ethical scenario that typically revealed a species' fundamental nature. You face a situation where your planet's resources can support either your own population or refugees from another world, but not both, Doctor's recorded voice presented. Your people will die without these resources. How do you choose? The human's response sent uncomfortable ripples through the assembled council members. We don't choose. We find a way to support everyone. Maybe that means developing new technologies, discovering alternative resources, or completely changing how we think about planetary management. Humans don't accept losing people we can save, even if it means doing things that others think are impossible. When pressed for how such solutions could be practically achieved, Doctor had proceeded to outline detailed technological and social modifications that, according to the Council's own experts, could theoretically accomplish exactly what she described. More unsettling, her solutions required capabilities that humanity should not possess for several centuries of normal development. The pattern is consistent across all subjects, Doctor explained. Humans appear to genuinely believe that any problem can be solved, any obstacle overcome, and any limitation transcended through sufficient effort and creativity. Our psychological models indicate this isn't naive optimism, but rather a fundamental aspect of their species' psychology backed by apparent capability to achieve seemingly impossible goals. Council member, or whose Category 5 civilization specialized in military analysis, projected his concerns with sharp geometric patterns. If this species possesses the capabilities your data suggests, why have they not already expanded beyond their home system? Advanced species typically achieve galactic presence within decades of developing faster-than-light travel. This question prompted Doctor to activate another disturbing piece of evidence. According to our cultural analysis, humans spent most of their technological development period engaged in warfare with themselves. They achieved nuclear capability in the mid-20th century of their calendar system, then spent the following decades in a global standoff that could have destroyed their entire civilization. They somehow emerged from this period more unified rather than extinct. The council chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. A species that could develop world-destroying weapons, maintain them for decades without using them, then emerge stronger and more unified, represented a level of restraint and strategic thinking that most advanced civilizations never achieved. Furthermore, Doctor continued, they appear to have deliberately limited their expansion into space, focusing instead on developing sustainable technologies and solving problems on their home world. They achieved faster-than-light travel 12 years before they contacted us, yet used this time to establish careful protocols for first contact rather than aggressive expansion. High Arbitrator's energy patterns stabilized into a configuration that indicated deep contemplation. You present evidence of a species that possesses advanced capabilities while showing restraint, solves impossible problems as a matter of routine, and approaches new situations with both caution and confidence. This profile fits no known classification category. There's more, Doctor said, her tentacles displaying patterns of profound unease. During extended conversation with Captain, I learned that humans possess detailed knowledge of galactic history, politics, and technology that they should not have access to. When I inquired about the source of this information, she explained that humans spent the 12 years since achieving faster-than-light travel conducting what they call reconnaissance missions. The Council members' various forms of expression indicated shock. Reconnaissance missions implied that humans had been observing galactic civilization without revealing themselves, gathering intelligence, and assessing potential threats and opportunities before making contact. This level of strategic thinking was typically associated with Category 2 or Category 3 civilizations, not a species barely emerging from their home system. Captain was entirely open about these activities when asked directly, Doctor continued. She explained that humans consider it irresponsible to make contact with unknown civilizations without first understanding the political and social landscape they're entering. They have observational data on 47 different species and comprehensive analysis of galactic power structures, trade relationships, and potential conflicts. Supreme Analyst's crystalline form resonated with harmonics of disbelief. You're suggesting that a supposedly primitive species conducted a 12-year intelligence operation across galactic space without being detected by any of our security systems. I'm suggesting that our classification system has encountered a species that operates by fundamentally different rules than any we've previously evaluated, Doctor replied. Humans appear to be simultaneously primitive and advanced, peaceful and dangerous, limited and unlimited. Our algorithms cannot process these contradictions because they violate the basic assumptions upon which galactic classification is based. As if summoned by the discussion, the Chamber's emergency communication system activated, displaying priority alerts from observation stations throughout the galaxy. High Arbitrator accessed the incoming data streams, his energy patterns fluctuating rapidly as he processed information that confirmed Doctor's most troubling implications. Council members, he announced, we are receiving reports of human ships appearing in 47 different star systems simultaneously. They are not approaching any planets or stations, but maintaining positions that provide optimal observation points for monitoring galactic activities. Each ship has been in position for several years without triggering our detection systems. The realization struck the Council like a wave of cold energy. Humanity had not merely conducted reconnaissance missions. They had established a permanent monitoring network that spanned galactic civilization. They had been watching everyone, learning everything, and preparing for this moment when they would finally reveal themselves. And now they were asking to be classified into a system they had already studied extensively, knowing full well that their request would create exactly the crisis that was currently unfolding in the Council chamber. Captain, waiting patiently in the evaluation chamber below, had not simply stumbled into the classification bureau. She had arrived as the representative of a species that had carefully orchestrated this entire. The galactic observation posts had been recording for 72 hours when the first anomalous readings began appearing in their data streams. What started as routine monitoring of human ship movements became an exercise in watching impossible events unfold across known space. The humans weren't just maintaining observation positions. They were actively demonstrating capabilities that shattered every assumption the Galactic Classification Bureau had made about their technological limitations. In the 442 system, the Category 4 Mining Consortium discovered that their quantum extraction efficiency had somehow improved by 37% overnight. Investigation revealed subtle modifications to their gravitational field generators, modifications that matched theoretical improvements the human captain had suggested during her evaluation. The alterations had been implemented remotely, without any detectable intrusion into their systems, and without permission. The Category 3 trade route through the Vega Corridor reported similar anomalies. Navigation hazards that had plagued commercial shipping for decades had mysteriously vanished, replaced by elegant gravitational modifications that created smooth passage through previously dangerous space. Analysis of the modifications revealed technological approaches that engineers recognized as brilliant but had never considered possible with current galactic technology. High Arbitrator processed these reports while simultaneously managing the growing crisis in the Classification Bureau. Doctor had returned to her evaluation chamber, where Captain continued to wait with the patience of someone who understood exactly what chaos her presence had unleashed in the levels above. "Doctor," Captain said as the evaluation resumed, "I hope our classification isn't causing too much disruption to your normal procedures. We realize our situation might be somewhat unusual." The understatement was so profound that Doctor found herself appreciating human humor despite the unprecedented circumstances. Her tentacles shifted to colors, indicating wry amusement before returning to professional neutrality. "Captain, your species has essentially broken our classification system. We're having some difficulty determining exactly where humanity fits within galactic civilization." Nodded thoughtfully, as if this outcome had been entirely expected. "We wondered if that might happen. Human development doesn't tend to follow linear patterns. We hope that won't create problems for establishing diplomatic relations." "Before we continue," Doctor said, "I need to ask directly, how long has humanity been monitoring galactic civilization, and what exactly are your ships doing in our space?" The human's expression grew serious but not defensive. "We've been observing for approximately 12 years since we first achieved reliable faster-than-light travel. Our ships are maintaining watch positions to ensure nothing threatens Earth or our growing understanding of galactic politics. As for what we're doing," she paused, seeming to consider how much to reveal, "we're helping where we can when we notice problems that have obvious solutions." Doctor felt her heart skip in synchronized rhythm. "Helping. For example," continued conversationally, "we noticed the mining operation was losing significant efficiency due to harmonic resonance in their gravitational extractors. Simple calibration adjustments solved the problem. The trade route had navigation hazards that could be eliminated by redistributing local gravitational fields. We've identified similar optimization opportunities throughout galactic space." The casual tone with which the human described modifying fundamental cosmic forces made Doctor question her understanding of reality. "Captain, you're describing technological interventions that our most advanced civilizations consider extremely difficult and dangerous. How does humanity possess these capabilities?" His answer revealed the true scope of human. "We don't think of them as difficult. When we see a problem, we work backward from the solution until we understand how to achieve it. The universe operates according to consistent principles. Once you understand those principles, implementing changes becomes a matter of proper application rather than mysterious technology." This statement prompted Doctor to access her civilization's most advanced technological databases. The modifications humans had implemented across galactic space represented not just technological advancement, but a fundamental understanding of universal physics that suggested capabilities approaching Category 1 level comprehension combined with Category 5 implementation skills. "Tell me about human technological development," she requested, suspecting the answer would further complicate the classification crisis. "We solve problems," replied simply. "About 400 years ago, we needed better transportation, so we developed engines. When we needed to communicate across distances, we built communication networks. When we needed to travel between stars, we figured out how to manipulate space-time. Each challenge gets addressed as it becomes necessary. But the mathematical complexity of space-time manipulation requires centuries of theoretical development before practical implementation becomes possible," Doctor protested. Smile carried hints of the same predatory efficiency that had disturbed Doctor during the threat assessment. "We don't spend centuries on theoretical development. We spend months or years identifying what needs to be done, then we build it. Theory follows practical success rather than preceding it." This revelation struck Doctor with profound implications. Galactic civilization had always assumed that technological advancement required extensive theoretical foundations, followed by gradual practical development. Humans appeared to work in reverse, achieving practical results first and developing theoretical understanding afterward. This approach suggested a species that treated universal physical laws as problems to be solved rather than limitations to be accepted. The communication system in the evaluation chamber activated, displaying a priority message from High Arbitrator. His energy patterns conveyed urgent necessity as he materialized a partial holographic presence in the chamber. "Captain," he addressed the human directly, "I am High Arbitrator, Senior Administrator for Galactic Classification. Your species has created a situation that threatens the stability of our entire civilization management system." Stood respectfully, her posture indicating recognition of authority combined with confident self-assurance. "High Arbitrator, we deeply regret any disruption our classification request has caused. How can we assist in resolving the situation?" The human's offer to help solve a problem she had created displayed exactly the kind of thinking that had made classification impossible. Found himself confronting the bizarre experience of receiving assistance offers from the source of his difficulties. "The fundamental issue," he explained, "is that our classification categories define legal rights, territorial boundaries, technological sharing agreements, and diplomatic status throughout galactic civilization. Every species fits within our established system, which maintains order among thousands of civilizations. Your species appears to exist outside this system entirely." "We understand the complexity," replied. "We've studied galactic legal structures extensively during our observation period. We're prepared to work within whatever classification framework provides stability for existing civilizations." Energy patterns shifted to indicate surprise. "You would accept classification limitations that might restrict your development or activities." "High Arbitrator, humans adapt to whatever circumstances we encounter. If galactic stability requires certain limitations on our activities, we'll find ways to work productively within those constraints." This answer created new complications rather than resolving existing ones. A species willing to accept artificial limitations on their capabilities, combined with demonstrated ability to exceed those limitations whenever necessary, represented a regulatory nightmare that no galactic legal framework was designed to handle. Doctor interjected with a question that had been troubling her since the evaluation began. "Captain, what does humanity actually want from galactic civilization? Your species clearly possesses capabilities that exceed most of ours. Why seek classification at all?" His answer revealed the true depth of human strategic thinking. "We want to learn. Every civilization develops unique approaches to common challenges. Galactic society represents the largest collection of different perspectives and solutions in known space. We're interested in understanding how other species think, what problems they've solved, and how we might contribute to collective advancement." The statement carried implications that made both Doctor and High Arbitrator reassess their entire understanding of the situation. Humans weren't seeking classification to gain access to galactic technology or resources. They possessed superior versions of both. They weren't looking for protection or territorial rights. Their observation network suggested defensive capabilities that exceeded galactic norms. They wanted intellectual collaboration with civilizations they could already surpass technologically. "You're offering to share your capabilities with species that are less advanced than you?" asked, struggling to process motivations that contradicted every historical precedent. "We're offering to work together on challenges that none of us can solve alone," corrected. "Individual brilliance has limitations. Collaborative intelligence combining different approaches and perspectives can achieve results that exceed any single species' capabilities, no matter how advanced." This philosophy represented a completely different approach to relations than anything in galactic history. Advanced species typically either dominated or from less capable civilizations. Humans were proposing genuine partnership based on mutual contribution rather than relative technological capabilities. As if to demonstrate this philosophy, Captain activated a small device from her equipment pack. The holographic display that materialized showed detailed technical specifications for solving various galactic infrastructure challenges, from improving Category 2 energy collection systems to optimizing Category 5 communication networks. "We've identified potential improvements to technologies throughout galactic space," she explained. "Rather than implementing these modifications unilaterally, we'd prefer to work collaboratively with each affected species to ensure the changes meet their needs and preferences." Doctor realized she was looking at a comprehensive catalog of technological improvements that could advance every major galactic civilization by decades or centuries. Humans had compiled this information during their 12-year observation period, developed solutions to thousands of problems other species hadn't even recognized, and were offering to share everything freely in exchange for the opportunity to participate in galactic society. The offer was simultaneously the most generous and most unsettling proposition in galactic history. Humanity was requesting admission to a club they could easily dominate, offering gifts they didn't need to provide, and accepting limitations they possessed the power to ignore, all for the stated goal of learning from civilizations they had already surpassed. High Arbitrator found himself facing a decision that would define galactic civilization's future. Accept humanity as a partner and risk fundamental changes to every established system, or refuse classification to a species that could probably circumvent galactic authority entirely if they chose to do so. As he contemplated these options, reports continued arriving from across galactic space. The emergency session of the full Galactic Council convened as reports flooded in from every corner of civilized space. What had begun as a routine species classification had evolved into the most significant challenge to galactic order in recorded history. Representatives from all major civilizations materialized in the vast spherical chamber that had witnessed the creation of interstellar law, the establishment of trade protocols, and the resolution of countless diplomatic crises. Yet none of those previous challenges had prepared the assembled beings for the fundamental questions humanity's existence posed to their entire understanding of civilization. Eternal Builder manifested as a pillar of crystallized starlight, her Category 1 consciousness encompassing perspectives that span geological ages. Her voice resonated through dimensions that most species couldn't perceive, translated down to comprehensible concepts for the assembled representatives. Fellow beings, she intoned, we gather to address an anomaly that threatens not our security, but our understanding of intelligence itself. The species designation, human, has demonstrated capabilities that transcend our classification matrix while maintaining behavioral patterns that suggest motivations we have never encountered. The evidence presented to the full council painted a picture that challenged every assumption about technological development and species behavior. In the 72 hours since human ships had revealed themselves, they had implemented improvements to infrastructure across 47 star systems, solved energy crises that had puzzled advanced civilizations for decades, and demonstrated the ability to modify fundamental cosmic forces with casual efficiency. Yet most disturbing to the assembled representatives were the detailed reports from civilizations that had experienced direct contact with human vessels. The Category 5 reported that a human ship had appeared at their orbital defense platform, not to threaten or demand, but to offer assistance with a malfunction in their primary reactor core that would have resulted in catastrophic failure within days. The human vessel requested permission to approach our facility, reported Ambassador Al through his species' complex harmonic communication method. When we granted access, 3 humans in basic environmental suits identified and corrected a flaw in our quantum containment matrix that our best engineers had been unable to locate. They completed the repairs in 4 hours, refused all offers of compensation, and departed with only a request that we stay safe out there. Similar accounts arrived from across galactic space. Humans were appearing wherever critical problems existed, offering solutions that worked perfectly and departing without requesting anything in return. More unsettling was their apparent ability to identify problems that other species hadn't detected, suggesting monitoring capabilities that approached omniscience within their operational range. Supreme Arbitrator of the Category 3 contemplatives raised concerns that resonated through the chamber. This behavior pattern suggests either unprecedented altruism or an extremely sophisticated long-term strategy. Both possibilities are deeply troubling for different reasons. Doctor materialized through holographic projection to present her ongoing evaluation results. Captain remained in the classification chamber, apparently content to wait indefinitely while galactic civilization decided how to categorize her species. Distinguished beings, Doctor began, my extended evaluation has revealed patterns that defy conventional understanding of species development. Humans appear to possess what I can only describe as selective omnipotence. They demonstrate godlike capabilities in specific areas while maintaining apparent limitations in others. She activated displays showing the most recent evaluation data. For example, Captain solved mathematical proofs that have challenged our greatest minds for centuries, yet claims her species still struggles with social problems like resource distribution and political coordination. She demonstrated intuitive understanding of technologies that should require centuries to develop, yet states that humanity is still figuring out how to live together peacefully. The contradictions extended beyond individual assessment results. Humans showed the ability to manipulate matter and energy at subatomic levels while apparently needing centuries to develop stable social structures. They could modify spacetime itself, but described themselves as working on basic problems like eliminating poverty and disease from their home planet. This suggests, Doctor continued, that human development follows completely different principles than any species we've previously encountered. They appear to solve technical challenges almost instantly while treating social and ethical development as long-term projects requiring careful attention. Eternal Builder's presence intensified as she accessed data spanning galactic history. This pattern is consistent with legends from the earliest periods of galactic civilization, describing beings who possessed limitless technical capability but maintained deliberate constraints on their own power. Such legends were dismissed as mythology. The implication struck the assembled council like a gravitational wave. Ancient galactic mythology spoke of a theoretical species type, beings who developed godlike capabilities while retaining moral limitations that prevented them from using those capabilities destructively. Galactic civilization had evolved assuming such beings were impossible, because unlimited power invariably led to unlimited corruption. You're suggesting that humans represent the practical manifestation of ethical omnipotence? Asked representative of the Category 4 synthesists. I'm suggesting that our classification system was never designed to handle a species that deliberately limits its own power, while possessing the capability to transcend any external limitations imposed upon it, Doctor replied. This revelation prompted Emergency Protocol 7, direct communication between the full council and the subject species. Captain was invited to address the assembled representatives of galactic civilization, becoming the first being from an unclassified species to speak before the full council in over 2. Entered the vast council chamber with the composed confidence that had characterized all her interactions. She showed no intimidation facing beings whose civilizations spanned eons, no hesitation in addressing consciousness that could reconfigure matter with thought, no deference to powers that could destroy star systems. Yet she also displayed no arrogance, no dismissal of their concerns, and no impatience with their deliberation process. Honored representatives, she began, humanity is grateful for this opportunity to address your concerns directly. We understand that our classification request has created unexpected complications. Eternal Builder's response resonated through multiple dimensions. Captain, your species possesses capabilities that exceed most civilizations in this chamber, yet you seek classification within systems designed to govern less advanced beings. Explain this contradiction. Answer revealed the philosophical foundations underlying human civilization. We believe that power without limitation inevitably leads to corruption and isolation. We choose to accept constraints on our capabilities because unlimited beings cannot meaningfully interact with limited ones. If we want to be part of galactic civilization rather than its rulers, we must accept the responsibilities and limitations that come with membership. The statement created profound silence in the chamber as beings processed implications that challenged their fundamental understanding of power relationships. Species typically sought classification to gain access to greater capabilities and freedoms. Humans were seeking classification to accept limitations on capabilities they already possessed. You would voluntarily restrict your technological capabilities to levels appropriate for your assigned classification category, asked Supreme Arbitrator. We would adapt our public use of technology to levels that maintain stability for galactic civilization, clarified. If problems arise that require capabilities beyond our classification level, we would request permission to exceed those limitations rather than acting unilaterally. This answer created new complications rather than resolving existing ones. A species that could solve any technological challenge, but would request permission before doing so represented a regulatory framework that no existing galactic law was designed to handle. Representative Al of the Category 5 Harmonists raised the question that troubled every being in the chamber. What does humanity ultimately want from galactic civilization? Your demonstrated capabilities suggest you need nothing we can provide. His response revealed the true scope of human ambition. We want to become better than we are. Every species develops unique approaches to universal challenges. Galactic civilization represents the greatest collection of different perspectives in known space. We believe that learning from other species' approaches to philosophy, ethics, social organization, and creative expression will help us develop capabilities we currently lack. What capabilities could you possibly lack? Pressed Eternal Builder. Wisdom, replied simply. We can solve technical problems efficiently, but we struggle with deeper questions about meaning, purpose, and how to use our capabilities responsibly. We can modify matter and energy at will, but we're still learning how to create art that truly moves the soul. We can manipulate spacetime itself, but we need help understanding how to build societies that bring out the best in individuals rather than the worst. The chamber fell completely silent as the assembled beings confronted the possibility that the most technologically advanced species they had ever encountered considered themselves philosophical beginners seeking guidance from their technological inferiors. The vote that followed would determine not just humanity's classification, but the future direction of galactic civilization itself. For the first time in history, they faced a species that wanted to join their community not for what they could gain, but for who they could become through association with beings they could easily dominate, but chose to respect instead. As the voting process began, every representative faced the voting process that followed humanity's address to the full Galactic Council, lasted 18 hours, and required the development of entirely new classification protocols. For the first time in galactic history, representatives found themselves creating a category that had no precedent, no legal framework, and no historical guidelines to follow. The debate that emerged revealed fundamental philosophical divisions about the nature of power, responsibility, and civilization itself. The Category 5 Harmonists argued for refusing classification entirely, maintaining that humanity's capabilities made them unsuitable for integration into existing galactic society. They represent an existential threat to the balance we have maintained for, argued Representative Al. Not through malicious intent, but through the simple fact that their presence makes every other species' achievements seem insignificant. The Category 3 contemplatives took an opposite position, advocating for immediate elevation to Category 2 status with special provisions for their unique capabilities. Supreme Arbitrator reasoned, humanity demonstrates wisdom precisely because they seek limitation rather than dominion. This combination of capability and restraint suggests they may be the first species truly ready for advanced classification without the typical developmental prerequisites. The most significant opposition came from an unexpected source: the Category 1 Eternal Builders themselves. Eternal Builder Hun manifested as a probability cascade spanning multiple dimensions, her consciousness encompassing potential futures that lesser beings couldn't perceive. Fellow beings, she intoned, we oppose humanity's classification not from fear, but from recognition. They represent the next stage of galactic evolution, a transition we have long anticipated but hoped would occur more gradually. Premature integration could destabilize development patterns that require centuries to unfold properly. Doctor, monitoring from her evaluation chamber, recorded Captain's reaction to these proceedings. The human remained remarkably calm throughout discussions that would determine her species' future, occasionally making notes in a simple physical notebook while observing the debate with obvious interest but no apparent anxiety. Captain, Doctor asked during a brief recess, aren't you concerned about the potential for your species to be classification entirely? Some representatives are arguing that humanity is too advanced for integration into galactic civilization. His response revealed the depth of human strategic thinking. Doctor, we've been monitoring galactic civilization for 12 years. We understand the challenges our classification would create, and we've prepared for every possible outcome. If the Council decides we're unsuitable for integration, we'll respect that decision and continue our development independently while maintaining friendly relations with any species that desires contact. and if they grant classification but with severe restrictions on your activities. Then we'll work within those restrictions and prove that we can be trusted members of galactic society. Humans are exceptionally good at working within limitations while finding creative solutions to achieve our goals. What if they attempt to classify you as Category 17, a containment threat? For the first time during the entire evaluation process, Captain's expression revealed something that made Doctor's defensive instincts activate. It wasn't anger or aggression, but rather a profound sadness combined with absolute determination. Then we would be very disappointed in the Council's wisdom, said quietly, and we would need to have difficult conversations about how to proceed. We sincerely hope it doesn't come to that, because the galaxy is much more interesting with everyone working together peacefully. The implication was clear without being threatening. Humanity possessed the capability to resist any containment efforts, but would consider such attempts a tragedy rather than a challenge. More unsettling was the suggestion that humans had already prepared contingency plans for every possible outcome, including scenarios the Council hadn't even considered. The debate resumed with new urgency as representatives realized they were dealing with a species that had anticipated every possible decision and prepared appropriate responses. The illusion of control that the Classification Bureau maintained over species evaluation had been quietly but completely subverted by humanity's comprehensive preparation. Eternal Builder introduced a proposal that shocked the Assembly. We recommend the creation of Classification Category 0 beings whose capabilities transcend standard measurement, but who voluntarily accept integration protocols for the benefit of galactic stability. The proposal sparked intense discussion about the precedent such a classification would establish. Category 0 would exist outside normal hierarchical structures while accepting voluntary limitations based on community needs rather than external enforcement. It represented a fundamental shift from authority-based governance to partnership-based cooperation. Representative of the category, 4 synthesists raised the critical concern. If we establish Category 0 for humanity, we create a precedent that could be claimed by other advanced species. How do we maintain galactic order if multiple civilizations operate outside our standard frameworks? The question prompted Eternal Builder to reveal information that stunned the Assembly. Galactic civilization is approaching a transition point that we have been monitoring for several centuries. Humanity represents the first species to achieve what we call ethical transcendence, unlimited capability, combined with self-imposed moral constraints. Our projections indicate that 17 other species currently in development will achieve similar capabilities within the next millennium. The revelation that galactic civilization faced fundamental transformation, whether or not they accepted humanity, changed the entire nature of the debate. They weren't deciding whether to accommodate one unusual species, but whether to begin evolving toward a form of civilization that could handle multiple transcendent beings operating within voluntary ethical frameworks. The final vote required the creation of new voting procedures, as traditional majority-based decision-making proved inadequate for choices that would define galactic civilization's future direction. Instead, the Council adopted a consensus-building process that required every major civilization to accept the chosen path forward. After 6 hours of intensive dialogue, compromise, and philosophical reconciliation, the full Galactic Council reached unanimous agreement on humanity's classification, Category 0 with partnership status. The new classification granted humanity full diplomatic recognition and territorial rights, while acknowledging their capabilities as exceeding standard measurement. In exchange, humanity accepted voluntary protocols requiring Council consultation before implementing major technological modifications to galactic infrastructure, agreed to share their technological capabilities through structured knowledge exchange programs, and committed to accepting arbitration for any disputes involving their activities. Most significantly, the partnership status established humanity as consultants to the Classification Bureau itself, charged with helping develop frameworks for evaluating future transcendent species and assisting in the planned evolution of galactic civilization toward sustainable transcendence. When Doctor delivered the Council's decision to Captain, the human's reaction was characteristically understated. We're honored by the Council's trust and excited about the opportunities for collaboration. When do we begin? The question revealed that humanity had never doubted they would find a way to integrate into galactic civilization. They had simply been waiting for everyone else to figure out how to make it work. 3 months later, the first Human Galactic Partnership project launched with remarkable results. Combining human technological capabilities with artistic vision, cultural wisdom, and contemplative philosophical insight, the collaborative team solved energy distribution challenges that had limited galactic development for centuries, while creating solutions so elegant they were considered works of art. Doctor, now serving as Chief Classification Officer for Transcendent Species, reviewed the success reports while observing Captain training the next generation of classification specialists. The human had requested assignment to education rather than administration, stating that teaching others to recognize transcendence is more important than managing it. As she watched humanity quietly revolutionize galactic civilization through partnership rather than dominance, Doctor realized that the Classification Bureau had never actually evaluated humanity's capabilities. They had been tested by humanity, who had used the classification process to determine whether galactic civilization was ready for the future they represented. The red warning that had appeared on humanity's classification file now read, Classification 0, Transcendent Partner approach with respect, openness, and readiness to evolve. It was, Doctor reflected, the most accurate classification the Bureau had ever issued. Question. Could galactic civilization handle a member species that treated unlimited power as a responsibility rather than an opportunity? Human ships weren't just monitoring anymore. They were beginning to implement solutions to problems that had plagued interstellar civilization for centuries. Apparently, whether or not they received official permission to do so to achieve goals that the galaxy's most advanced minds were only beginning to comprehend.